The crunch of tires on frozen gravel woke me before dawn. In the mountains, that sound means one of two things. Either someone's lost or someone's come looking for trouble. I pushed open the cabin door, coffee steaming in one hand, double-barreled shotgun balance in the other. Not because I planned to use it, but because in Pineville County, people tend to listen better when you look serious about your mornings. 3 squad cars sat at the edge of my clearing, blue lights painting the pines like a winter carnival. And in the middle of it all, framed by exhaust and mist, stood Delilah Thornfield, Alpine Vista's self-appointed queen, dressed like she'd wandered off the set of a corporate perfume ad. White blazer, silk scarf, heels sharp enough to kill a rattlesnake. She jabbed one manicured finger at me, as if she could sign my arrest warrant with a gesture alone. "Officer, that's him. He's illegally occupying HOA property." I sipped my coffee. "Morning, Sheriff." Sheriff Martinez's mustache twitched, his version of a groan. He'd known me since I was knee-high to an axe handle. "Rex, just humor me," he muttered, stepping close. "Show me whatever paperwork you've got. Let's make this quick." The mountain air tasted like snow and diesel fumes. I reached into my flannel, unfolded a yellow document that smelled faintly of cedar and tobacco. The sheriff's eyes skimmed it, and his whole posture changed. "Where'd you get this?" he asked. "Great-grandfather left it in the cabin rafters." His jaw worked silently before he turned to the squad cars. "Stand down. This man isn't trespassing. He's standing on his own land." Delilah's smile froze like a lake in January. "That can't be right. This hovel sits right in the middle of our community. He hasn't paid dues. He hasn't complied with." I let her rant bounce off the trees. "Out here, mountains don't care about HOA bylaws, and neither do I." But it wasn't her shrill voice that set my teeth on edge. It was the quiet hum of her Tesla still idling at the tree line, blocking my driveway like a white sentinel. She'd been circling my cabin for weeks, clipboard in hand, taking pictures of my woodpile, my truck, even my dog. And now she'd brought the law to my porch. As the sheriff walked her back to the cars, I watched frost curl off her heels with each angry step. Something about that image stuck with me. A woman who thought she could tame the mountains by filing paperwork in Seattle. When the engines finally retreated down the dirt road, I sat back in my grandfather's rocking chair, boots propped on the porch rail, letting the silence settle like fresh snow. General Patton, my 100-pound bloodhound, plopped his head on my knee, watching the last red taillights disappear. "This isn't about dues," I told him. "She wants the land." Patton's tail thumped once, as if to say no kidding. "Most folks spend their lives running from trouble. Me, I'd spent 20 years on oil rigs where trouble shows up in steel-toed boots and hard hats. You learn to spot it, size it, and figure out whether to push back or let it burn itself out. Delilah Thornfield wasn't going to burn herself out. She was going to keep pressing until someone pressed back harder. The truth is, I could have ended it that morning. One phone call to the county clerk, one photocopy of that old land grant, and her HOA nonsense would have vanished like smoke. But something in her eyes told me this wasn't just a petty power grab. It was personal. She wasn't satisfied with compliance. She wanted conquest. And that made it personal for me, too. I glanced at the mountains beyond the tree line, their ridges catching first light like blades of ice. These were Caldwell Hills, carved and logged and hunted by my family long before anyone dreamed up gated communities. You don't sell ground your grandfather bled on. You protect it. I didn't know then how far she'd go to take it, or how deep my family's roots really ran under this valley. I just knew this was the first shot in a war neither of us had asked for, but both of us were too stubborn to walk away from. I leaned back in the chair, took another slow sip of coffee, and muttered to the dog, "Better fetch your battle collar, old boy. Looks like the HOA just declared open season." His ears twitched. Somewhere down the road, a white Tesla purred into the distance, already planning its next pass. And in the thin, cold air of dawn, I could feel it, the mountain tightening like a drawn bowstring, waiting for the arrow. The next morning, frost still clung to the porch rail when I spotted her again. Not Delilah herself this time, but her shadow, a black SUV with tinted windows parked half a mile down the road, camera lens glinting between the trees. The HOA wasn't wasting time. By noon, 3 county inspectors trudged up my driveway with clipboards and polite smiles that didn't reach their eyes. "Routine safety check," the lead one said, though we all knew this wasn't routine. Behind them, Delilah's white Tesla idled like a waiting vulture. I waved them in, offered coffee, even sliced jerky from the smokehouse. They poked through every inch of the cabin, tested the well, measured the beams, tapped the septic lid like they expected it to explode. All the while, I felt her gaze from the road, cold as the mountain air. When they left 2 hours later, the head inspector shook my hand. "Mr. Caldwell, this place is built better than most new homes. We'll file the report today. You're in the clear." I caught Delilah's reflection in her Tesla window as they told her. Her jaw tightened until it looked like porcelain about to crack. She didn't wave, didn't drive off, just sat there, planning her next move. By that evening, the harassment had shifted gears. My driveway was blocked twice, first by a delivery truck accidentally sent to the wrong address, then by Delilah herself, leaning against her Tesla with that fixed smile. "Oh, Rex," she said sweetly, "didn't you get our updated survey? This road's HOA common space now." I kept my voice calm. "You're parked on a right-of-way that's been here since my grandfather's Model T rolled over it in 1923. "Then prove it," she said, climbing into her car. The Tesla purred off, spitting gravel like a challenge. Over the next week, she came at me from every angle. Noise complaints about my morning wood chopping, photographs of my stacked firewood marked up with red arrows, even a letter demanding I repaint the cabin to community-approved earth tones. Word travels fast in mountain country. By Friday, neighbors I hadn't seen in years were knocking on my door with casseroles and quiet warnings. Jake Morrison from the hardware store told me Delilah was leaning on the local paper, painting me as a stubborn holdout lowering property values. Sarah Avery, a nurse with a non-conforming vegetable garden, said she'd been threatened too. "She told me my tomatoes were unsightly," Sarah muttered, setting down a basket of them on my porch. "Guess I'm a criminal now." We started swapping stories around my fire pit at night. Locals who'd lived here for generations, now branded troublemakers for not living up to some Pinterest-perfect fantasy of mountain life. General Patton became our unofficial mascot. The old bloodhound developed a sixth sense for Delilah's Tesla and made a game of waddling over to lift his leg on her pristine white tires whenever she crept too close. The neighbors loved it. Me too. But even laughter couldn't hide the truth. Delilah wasn't just after compliance. She was tightening a noose, trying to make my life unbearable until I sold out. One evening, as the sun slid behind the ridges and turned the sky copper, I found an envelope tucked under my cabin door. No stamp, no return address. Inside, a letter typed in stiff legal language demanding $25,000 in mandatory improvements, new siding, approved paint colors, landscaping, 30 days to comply, or face daily fines of $500. I sat on the porch, letter in one hand, mason jar of moonshine in the other, and thought about my grandfather's words. "Son, when lawyers come calling, know your land better than they do." I'd planned to ignore Delilah, let her power games burn themselves out. But this was different. She wasn't just swinging at me now. She was swinging at everyone who called these hills home. And deep in the rafters of my cabin, wrapped in oilskin and dust, I knew there were papers older than any HOA covenant. The kind of papers that could change the whole fight. I hadn't looked at them in years. But that night, under lantern light and pine shadows, I climbed into the attic and started digging. Because if Delilah wanted war, it was time to see just how deep the Caldwell roots went. The attic smelled like cedar, dust, and memories too old to name. My grandfather used to hide things up here. Tools he didn't want borrowed, jars of honey from long-gone seasons, and once a Winchester rifle he swore was too pretty to waste on varmints. But I wasn't hunting rifles. I was hunting proof. By lantern light, I pried open an old trunk stamped Caldwell 1890. Inside, under a folded flag and a stack of black and white photographs, I found them, oilskin-wrapped documents brittle as autumn leaves. Survey maps drawn by hand, deeds signed in ink the color of rust, and one oversized certificate bearing the Montana territorial seal. The wording made my breath catch. Land grant, issued to Josiah Caldwell, encompassing the full boundary of Pineville County, mineral and water rights retained in perpetuity. Not 40 acres, not 400, the entire valley. I sat back on my heels, heart hammering, the paper trembling between my fingers. Delilah thought she was choking me with fines and surveys, but she was building her empire on Caldwell ground. Every house, every manicured lawn, every white picket fence, all sitting over rights my family never sold. But power's a dangerous thing to feel in your hands. The old man's voice echoed in my head. The difference between a good man and a great man is what he does when nobody's watching. I'd seen men drunk on power before, out on the rigs in Alaska, supervisors who'd risk lives just to win a bonus. I swore I'd never become one of them. Still, I couldn't ignore what these papers meant. If I wanted to, I could shut off Alpine Vista's water tomorrow. I could bankrupt Delilah Thornfield with a single court filing. That thought should have felt good. Instead, it sat heavy in my gut like bad whiskey. The next morning, I took the documents to someone who'd know if they were real. Ephraim Jacobs, the 78-year-old surveyor who'd mapped half this valley with nothing but a compass and grit. His office smelled like pipe smoke and old leather. "Rex boy," he said, adjusting his glasses as I spread the papers across his desk. "I surveyed this land for your granddad back in '72. But this," he tapped the territorial seal with a crooked finger. "This goes way deeper. These are original homestead boundaries. Your family didn't just build a cabin. They built the county. You're telling me all this land, even under Delilah's precious HOA, still belongs to us?" "Not the surface," Ephraim said slowly. "Those lots were sold fair and square. But the mineral and water rights? They're yours. Every acre." He looked at me over the top of his glasses. "That's a hammer big enough to crack the whole mountain. Question is, do you swing it?" On the drive home, the question gnawed at me. That evening, Trouble arrived wearing a cheap suit. A wiry man with a slick briefcase climbed out of a black sedan parked behind Delilah's Tesla. "Rex Caldwell? Name's Dennis Polk. I'm conducting a routine background check." Behind him, Delilah watched from her car window, smiling like a chess player about to call checkmate. I offered him sweet tea on the porch and let him ask his fishing questions. My work in Alaska, my bank accounts, my family history. He was looking for dirt, and Delilah thought she'd find it. When he left, I knew two things. First, I didn't have any skeletons to dig up. And second, Delilah was running scared. People who think they're winning don't hire private investigators. They don't need to. 2 days later, the fear turned to open war. A courier delivered a lawsuit demanding $50,000 in fines and 3 years of back HOA dues, claiming my cabin sat on community-controlled land. It was legal fiction, but it would bleed me dry fighting it in court. I set the papers down on my kitchen table beside my great-grandfather's land grant. In one hand, I held Delilah's weapon, modern law used like a club. In the other, I held mine, old law, older than her entire subdivision. And for the first time, I wondered not whether I could win, but what winning was supposed to look like. Because revenge is simple. Justice? That's trickier. By the time October frost glazed the pines, Delilah Thornfield had dropped all pretense of civility. She stopped waving at neighbors, stopped hiding her Tesla behind tinted glass. Now she parked it sideways at the end of my drive like a blockade, arms crossed, sunglasses flashing that cold courtroom stare. "Clock's ticking, Mr. Caldwell," she'd say every time, tapping her watch like I was late for sentencing. But the real siege came in paper, not words. Certified letters arrived weekly. Violations, fines, emergency assessments totaling $73,000. They said my cabin roof color wasn't HOA approved. My firewood stack was unsightly. Even general pattern was detrimental to community standards. I burned each letter in the wood stove and watched the smoke curl like unanswered prayers. What worried me wasn't the harassment. I could take that. What worried me was what it was doing to everyone else. Jake Morrison from the hardware store stopped by one evening, red-faced and shaking. "She's threatening to condemn your place at the next HOA meeting. So she's got county backing." Sarah Avery, arms full of vegetables, whispered, "Half the board wants her gone, but they're scared. She's calling in favors, pulling strings." People were talking about moving. This valley had never been scared of anyone. Not sheriffs, not lawyers, not winter itself. And now folks were packing up because one woman with a clipboard decided they didn't belong. That night, I sat on the porch with General Patton's heavy head in my lap. The old land grant spread across the table. I kept thinking about what Ephraim Jacobs had said. That's a hammer big enough to crack the whole mountain. Question is, do you swing it? I could end this tomorrow. One filing at the county courthouse and Delilah's HOA would crumble. I could shut off their water, bankrupt their development, scare her straight. But when I closed my eyes, I saw more than Delilah's smug face. I saw kids riding bikes under those fancy streetlights. I saw retirees who'd sunk their life savings into homes here. Innocent people would take the hit if I swung that hammer too hard. Still, Delilah didn't leave me much choice. 3 nights later, I got the call from Jake. She's hired some outfit out of Denver. Mountain Property Solutions. Real wolves. They're running this thing now. I knew the name. They specialized in hostile HOA takeovers, jacking up fees, forcing out longtime residents, flipping properties for profit. Corporate predators with designer briefcases. They showed up at the next HOA meeting in slick suits, talking about preserving property values through strategic enforcement. Translation: run off anyone who didn't fit their country club vision. Even Delilah's allies shifted uncomfortably when one of the suits told Sarah Avery her vegetable garden would need to be eliminated immediately. That was Delilah's fatal mistake, bringing in outsiders who treated everyone like collateral damage. Her arrogance was cracking her own support. Meanwhile, I started building my own quiet army. Sarah Blackwood, an environmental lawyer, drove up from Missoula to look over my family's land rights. Dr. Ruby Sterling, a conservation biologist, confirmed 3 endangered species habitats on my property. Harold Finch, the local banker, ran numbers on a plan that could protect the whole valley, a community land trust, democratic, immune to HOA tyranny. We met at my cabin by lantern light, maps and legal pads scattered across the table while wood smoke curled from a stove. "Rex," Sarah said, pushing her glasses up her nose, "what you have here isn't just leverage. It's a blueprint. You can turn this fight into something bigger, something that lasts." Or, I said, staring at the papers, "I can end it with one signature." Ruby shook her head. "End it for who? Delilah? Or the people who live here?" The weight of that question sat heavy on my chest long after they left. 2 mornings later, Sheriff Martinez pulled up looking grim. "Rex, the FBI's sniffing around. Seems your HOA queen tried bribing Commissioner Hicks to condemn your cabin." I laughed, but it didn't feel good. Delilah wasn't just playing dirty. She was getting desperate. Desperate people do reckless things. As the sheriff's cruiser rolled away, I looked at General Patton pacing the porch, ears twitching like he sensed the storm coming. The valley felt different, quieter, like the trees were holding their breath. The next HOA meeting wasn't going to be a meeting. It was going to be a battlefield. And I had to decide before I walked in, would I come as a man with a hammer or a man with a plan? The Pineville County Community Center had never been this full. Folding chairs scraped across the floor, cameras whirred from the back wall, and the air smelled like burnt coffee in anticipation. You could feel it, the hush before a thunderclap. Delilah Thornfield made her entrance like a politician on election night. White suit, perfect hair, a legal briefcase that looked like it could kill a man if you dropped it hard enough. Behind her, 3 corporate suits from Mountain Property Solutions flanked her like bodyguards. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, voice carrying like a church bell, "our community faces a threat to its safety and its property values." Slide after slide flashed on the projector. Photos of my cabin, diagrams with red arrows, charts predicting plummeting home prices. She made me out to be a hermit squatting on land that belonged to civilization. The room murmured as she called for immediate condemnation of this dangerous structure. When she pointed toward me, finger trembling with fake outrage, I stood. Not fast, not slow, just steady enough to let the cameras find me. "Commissioner Hicks," she said, voice sharp as broken glass. This man is a menace to our way of life. I formally request you condemn his cabin and authorize the HOA to take control of the property. Polite applause rippled through her side of the room. I noticed even some of her allies weren't clapping. Commissioner Hicks cleared his throat. Mr. Caldwell, you've asked for time to respond. I walked to the podium with a single manila folder in my hand. No slides, no charts, just paper older than everyone in the room combined. Ms. Thornfield is right about one thing, I said, voice steady. This isn't just about my cabin. It's about who actually owns this valley. I held up a yellow document bearing a territorial seal. The crowd leaned forward. This is an original land grant issued to my great-grandfather in 1889, I continued. It doesn't cover 40 acres. It doesn't even cover 400. It covers the entire Pineville County Basin, mineral rights, water rights, and usage retained by my family in perpetuity. Every lawn sprinkler in Alpine Vista runs on water I own. Every driveway, every swimming pool, every inch of land under your feet is tied to this. Gasps rippled through the room. Someone dropped a coffee cup. Delilah shot to her feet, face white as her suit. That's impossible. I researched every deed. You researched surface law, I said, meeting her eyes. You never looked underground. The silence was heavy enough to hear the cameras zooming in. I could end this fight today by shutting off your water, I said, letting the words hang in the still air. I could bankrupt this HOA with a single court filing. But that's not why I'm here. I gestured to Sarah Blackwood, Dr. Ruby Sterling, and Harold Finch, who stood up from the audience. We're creating the Pineville County Conservation Trust, a community-owned cooperative. No more HOA tyranny. No more corporate enforcers. Every resident keeps their home. Every voice gets a vote, and 8,000 acres of this valley stay protected forever. A low murmur rolled through the crowd. Not fear this time, but hope. Delilah tried to speak, but Sheriff Martinez stepped forward, followed by two strangers in dark suits. Miss Thornfield, he said evenly, these gentlemen are with the FBI. You're under arrest for attempted bribery of a public official. The cameras caught everything. Her shocked face, the click of handcuffs, the suits flanking her as she was walked out past neighbors she tried to control. The room erupted. Not with cheers, not yet, but with something quieter, stronger. People were standing, talking to each other instead of shouting. Even Alpine Vista residents, the ones who'd once feared me, were nodding, shaking my hand as I stepped down from the podium. For the first time in months, the valley felt like itself again. I glanced at Commissioner Hicks, who was still staring at the land grant in disbelief. Mr. Caldwell, he said slowly, you could have buried her with this. Could have, I said, folding the paper carefully. But the point isn't to bury anyone. It's to make sure no one else ever has to fight this same war. General Patton thumped his tail at my feet, as if he knew the battle wasn't just won. It was over. The valley let out the breath it had been holding. But I knew Section 6. The real work was just beginning. 30 days after Delilah Thornfield's arrest, the valley gathered at my cabin. Not for a fight this time, but for a vote. We called it the Great Decision Barbecue. Hickory smoke drifted through the crisp autumn air, mingling with the smell of pine and wood stove bread. Kids chased each other between tables. Neighbors who'd spent months glaring over fences now stood shoulder to shoulder, plates piled high, talking like old friends. I watched from the porch as Sarah Blackwood checked ballots. Harold Finch calculated numbers on his battered clipboard, and Dr. Ruby Sterling laughed with Jake Morrison over coffee so strong it could strip paint. The vote wasn't about me. It was about whether the valley wanted to live under another HOA president or under itself. A community land trust, owned by everyone, answerable to no one's ego. When the count came in, the cheer rose like wine through the trees. 87% approval. People who'd once feared me now lined up to shake my hand. Even a few former Delilah supporters, humbled by what they'd seen, stayed to help stack chairs. The Pineville County Conservation Trust was born on my grandfather's porch, not with legal threats or court orders, but with mason jars of cider and neighbors promising to look out for each other again. The transformation was quiet but powerful. HOA signs came down. Democratic council meetings went up. Property values stabilized without fear tactics. Federal grants poured in to protect 8,000 acres of forest, while the remaining land became home to hiking trails, environmental programs, and 47 new jobs: guides, educators, maintenance crews. Families stayed who might have been forced out. Kids learned what it meant to own something bigger than money. As for Delilah, her mansion sold at a loss to a young teacher's family who planted tomatoes in the front yard. The white Tesla was gone from my driveway, traded for a rust-red pickup parked crooked in the same spot every morning. Delilah herself avoided prison. 2 years probation, 500 hours of community service, but her law license didn't survive the bribery charge. Last I heard, she was writing articles about lessons in leadership from a rental apartment in Seattle. I didn't hate her for it. Truth be told, I almost felt sorry for her. Delilah had power, but no roots. She never understood that mountains don't bow to paper. They bow to people who care for them. On the night we finalized the trust, I sat on my porch with General Patton, the yellowed land grant folded neatly beside my rocking chair. The valley below glowed with chimney smoke and porch lights, no longer divided into neat plots and angry factions, just homes, warm and breathing together. I thought about how easy it would have been to crush her, to turn those legal documents into a weapon. But power and used wisely becomes power misused. My grandfather's voice was clear in my memory. The difference between a good man and a great man is what he does when nobody's watching. Nobody was watching when I decided not to shut off Alpine Vista's water. Nobody would have blamed me if I'd gone for revenge. But choosing something better, choosing to lift the valley instead of scorch it, that's the kind of victory no headline can cheapen. When the stars came out, sharp as frost, I traced the ridges against the sky and felt the old mountains humming like they'd been holding their breath through all of this. "Looks like we won, old boy," I said to Patton. He gave one lazy thump of his tail, but it didn't feel like winning. It felt like coming home to something older than law and louder than fear. The sound of neighbors turning back into neighbors, of land choosing its people as much as people choose their land. Some nights now, when the wind moves just right through the pines, I swear I can hear my grandfather's laughter rolling down the hills. Not gloating, just proud, because the sweetest victory isn't beating your enemies. It's proving the place you love can outlast them. And these mountains, they remember who listens when they speak.